What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure of speaking to a brother or sister who's doing amazing work in every field of human endeavor, and they share their God story, the way in which God has been at work in their lives and specifically in their work and their talents. And today is no different. I have my sister, our sister, Michelle Carter. What's going on, Michelle?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm solid. I'm excited now. You know, there's a couple conversations where I have to put disclaimers out. I'm gonna be quick on these disclaimers. I love Michelle deeply. Michelle is family, and we go back. Overlapped that time at Texas. Was a
Yeah.
counterpart teammate. Have been around the world, from Beijing, London, and
Yeah.
the like, and in the Olympic Games. And I'm just so grateful to call her a friend, a sister who has been there with me on my faith journey when I was figuring out who God was in my life. We both went to St. James Missionary Baptist Church when we were in Austin
Yeah.
at that time. And though we have a lot of laughter, one of the things that we were saying even offline laughing about is like, well, I'll take with me for the rest of my life how formative it was and how encouraging she was for me as I was learning about God in a real way. And so, there's so much I could say about Michelle, but I think many people in the world has come to know Michelle as, American record holder, Hall of Famer, Texas, Olympic gold medalist in the shot put, only winner from the U.S. of A. since this thing even kicked off in the '48. She is the one of the most decorated athletes from the states of all time, and still going. But that's just me and my limited perspective. Who is Michelle Carter? Michelle, tell us, who are you?
Man, I feel like you gave a good spiel. Like, what do I need to add to that? Oh, I say when I think about who am I, like I'm number one, a child of God.
Mm,
Like number one, that's like the foundation of who I am. But then I'm like the homie, Like I genuinely um love everyone.
mm,
Like a lot of people say like how can you do that? Like I do believe I do
mm,
because it's a choice.
mm,
So I choose to love, and I feel like that's the greatest gift you can give anyone.
mm,
Um, but I mean, that's me. Like I want everybody, at least when you have contacted me, you want to be like, okay, she was cool. I felt accepted. Like, okay, I can hang it with her. I can kick it with her again.
mm,
Like that's how I see myself. Like I'm Michelle the homie.
mm. Yo, you are tried and true to that. I think there's people who kind of come up. There's different type of childhoods that we learn about, right? There's the childhood of the child who was the parent was in the military, and they traveled and they moved around a lot. There's that
Yeah.
childhood, but there's also the childhood of a child who's coming up in a household where their parent is whether it's a entrepreneur and they know that very well, or your parent is a professional athlete, and that was your
Mhm.
story. And we were even laughing offline. I'm just like, yo, you was in San Jose playing? Yeah. Like, I didn't even know, right? But it's because of the context
Yeah.
of coming in a household where your father played in the league, at 3 Super Bowl rings, a winner. He also was Olympic medalist, a silver medalist in the Los Angeles Games. What was that dynamic coming up as we kind of get to know about who Michelle was as a young child coming up?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I didn't know that my dad's job wasn't normal because he played for the San Francisco 49ers. And at that time, since I was born into while he was playing, all my friends' dad played football too.
Mm,
So he was like, "Oh, daddy went to work. Your dad went to work. My dad came back last night. Your dad came back last night. Cool." It's normal. So I didn't realize that what my dad did wasn't normal probably until I got to high school. And people were like, "Your dad's Michael Carter?" I'm like, yeah, like your dad played football. Dad went to work just like your daddy. Like I don't understand. So it was different, and my parents didn't make a big deal about what my dad did. Like he really said, daddy has to go to work, and that's how it was.
Mm,
And so my dad wasn't that dad. Like I'm this football player. My dad really, he don't. I say this not in this way. He don't like people. My dad is a homebody. He wants to be around his family, and so it was like, okay, dad was always home. Even though he had his games, he always came home. And so I didn't know. And I didn't know my dad was in the Olympics until I got to high school as well, because I knew he played football, but until I got into track and field is when I learned what he accomplished in track and field.
mm.
So I feel like it was, for me, it was normal. I didn't feel like I didn't have a different upbringing than anybody else. My dad's job, he just played football versus someone's dad who went to the office.
Mm. Mm. This is interesting because I think you're actually setting the stage of even kind of the conversation here, because people would assume that in coming up in that household, then that was cultivated so early. And so even for you, you're kind of saying like, nah, it wasn't until like high school then it really didn't hit. So then so suffice it to say, was there a sense of pressure coming up that you had to follow in his footsteps, or not really, because you didn't really understand stuff until you were in high school?
It was not even understand. My dad didn't talk about it.
Mm.
I didn't talk about it. He don't sit there and watch football all day long and watch old football clips and then let me show you what your daddy used to do. Right, I'm retired. We're done. I am 100% full time dad.
Mm.
And so he didn't put what he did in front of us.
Mm.
Like the main thing, if anything, he pushed the most when we were young. Like, well, your daddy went to college, so that means you have to go to college. I have my degree, you have to get your degree plus some.
Mm.
And so, like, I guess it's what you value the most. And I feel like people put a lot of value in titles and what people do versus putting value on who the person is.
Mm. Mm.
So when you're saying that, because in my mind, I'm like, when you were talking about how people, I'm like, but at the end of the day, that's just my dad.
Mm.
And that's what I saw him as. I don't care what he does. At the end of the day, he is my dad.
Mm.
And so seeing him in that way and not putting all these other expectations of what they think my dad should be because they idolize these positions and these titles and these jobs and these sports. It's like at the end of the day, he is my dad, and that's what he did. He did his job by being my dad. He didn't care if I ever played sports.
Mm.
He never pushed that. When I came to him with the permission slip, he was like, so who told you to do track? Like, who asked you to do this? Like, what they say to you? Because he wanted to make sure that they weren't trying to make me do it because they know what he did.
Mm.
He was like, something you want to do, then we're going to do this because you want to do this,
Mm.
not because of me, not because of anybody else. And my parents have been good with that. We're not pushing us to do something, but just get an education. Find something you like, but make sure you go all the way with it. And that was the main thing my parents taught me growing up.
This is so refreshing to hear, because I think you hear stories of people sometimes living through their children in ways that are not healthy, and it just seems
Yeah.
like there's so much freedom that you had to explore and figure out who you are. And it reminds us of, obviously, of another father story, and a heavenly father story, of the freedom that we're given to go on our path
Yeah.
and to be on our journey. I do want to press this a little bit further, and then I want to get more into just your relationship with God and how that was cultivated. It, when did you realize that, oh, suck, I think I may be like really good at this thing? Like when did it go beyond like, I'm trying to
Yeah.
win, I'm competitive, clearly I'm doing this thing, to this may be a little something. I got a little Thanos.
Right.
I got Thanos hand. You mean like just
Right. So I was in 10th grade, right? And I had already won state as a freshman. I won state as a senior. And I'm going through summer track and we get to the JOs. And then I had the opportunity to make a world junior team.
Mm,
And so I try out for the World's Junior team. I make it. I'm like 14 years old. And we get to go to Debrecen, Hungary. Now, where is it on the map? I still can't find it, but I know it's there.
mm.
And I just remember we are getting there. It was a journey getting there. But when we got there, I was like, this is so cool. Like, they paid for my flight. They paid for everything. They feed us. I got all the cool USA team. Like, I'm walking around as a 14-year-old in the official 2000 Olympic jersey. And that's when it dawned on me, like, they just gave us this stuff. And I'm like, dang, if I could continue to do this, how many US jerseys can I get? And that was the thing. Like, I'm like, I didn't get all this gear. Like, how much gear can I get? How many jerseys can I collect? And that's kind of how that started. I didn't even think about really thinking about it as a career, getting paid. I'm like, this is cool. Like, no one else I know can say they have official Olympic gear but me. How many times can I do this? How far can I go to? What other country can I go to? And I think I probably traveled overseas every year after 10th grade. And like, no one in my circle could say that. But that's when I realized, like, this is actually pretty cool. And I had a great competition there. I finished second, and that memory has always been with me because I realized that track was so much bigger than what it was in the US doing summer track and state. Like, this is the world. This is not just my state anymore, even my country. I just compete against the world, and this is crazy.
This is so dope because I think, it's almost like to be younger, right? We're very young, right, in the grand scheme of things, but to be younger and so much of the innocence that you kind of are communicating of, like, I just wanted some jerseys from US. I just thought this was dope, to, the fact that you're traveling around the world. And so by this time you're in Texas, you're Red Oak, you're in Texas at this time. And so I want to hold this, and I'm going to come back to this track and field piece. And then, then talk about the faith piece, because I think typically a lot of times when you have conversations, and sometimes I have conversations with brothers and sisters who are from let's say from Southern United States, sometimes for them, they had like almost like two phases where they like, you know what, everybody went to church because we all went to church. It was part of the culture and is what we did. And then there was another element, a place when it was all right, it went beyond like this thing that I did because everybody did it to something. It really became personal. What was your journey? What was the genesis with you and God? How did that look like in your youth all the way to kind of obviously young adulthood?
Yeah, so I was that girl that grew up in church. I grew up at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship with Pastor Tony Evans. Like, that's where I grew up. And I remember going there as a child. I was involved in Awana, which is like a Bible study program for kids where we had to memorize verses. And then we would have to go to the Awana Olympics where we would have like this Bible trivia, and then we would have like the athletic part. So we was like one of the very few Black churches involved. They were trying to get us on the trivia, but we were like, oh, we got this three-legged race at tug of war. Like, we got it. But and like, we had a lot of fun doing that. And then like, even with my husband, because me and him, we grew up in the same church together. So we remember having all this fun, learning our verses, getting prizes, going to camp, going to Bible Olympics. And then we got to youth. And then we thought we was grown by the time you get to youth. And then, you're not in elementary school, you're in high school, you get to hang out with all the older kids. And we just had a lot of fun. And I wanted to be there. I was an usher. I was in the choir. I volunteered with the kids. We did Bible study. Bible study and like what they do in the summertime.
It was like vacation Bible schools.
Vacation Bible. Yeah. Listen, our church vacation Bible school was off the chain. So I really enjoyed being at church. So it wasn't a struggle for me. But when I got to college, I remember things were a little different. And I had a moment, I don't even know if we ever talked about this. I had a moment where when I first got there, most of my music, this was before you got there though, most of my music was Christian based. I didn't really listen to a lot of radio because number one, my mama didn't like us to. Like back in the day, I couldn't even watch Moesha because my mama said Moesha to her stepmama and she didn't want us to get no ideas. So I remember they were coming in my room. They was like, what kind of CDs are these? I had like Christian rap, which really wasn't a thing back then. And I was like, Dad, and I was like, my mama was here. Like, that's why I had to pull out the Christian music for her. And I was like, almost a little embarrassed because now I seem like that little, like a dork. Because if all I had was this Christian music and I was trying to be cool and fit in, and that moment still kind of haunts me to this day because it was like, I just denied Christ like Peter did. And I'm like, I didn't mean to do that. But in that moment, I kind of panicked because I now have to try to explain this is who I am. And then I think that was a learning, a turn in my life where um, I opened up the door to be vulnerable to attacks by the enemy.
Mm,
And so going through college where you are in a space where you get to make your own decisions and you kind of decide what life is going to be for you, I always knew like I have to go to church.
mm,
Like if everything comes crashing down, I at least need to go to church. And I had a wonderful opportunity when going to my freshman year where one of my roommates, her dad connected her to this church, and one of the guys there, young in the young adult ministry, would come and pick us up for Bible study and for church service until we finally got a car and then we came over there. But the person I was going with stopped going, but I continued to go because I'm like, I know I need this no matter what.
mm,
And so then during that time, I was just kind of struggling. Like, okay, number one, the church was different than my church. I didn't grow up Baptist or a Kojic or anything, so it was like a little culture shock for me. Um, I loved it because he really preached the word, and but I always still wanted that relationship for myself. But then I was just struggling because I was like, hey, this is how I would normally do it. This is what my parents want me to do, but this is how I'm seeing it.
mm,
Which one do I do? Because either one of them aren't right,
mm,
but something I've been really paying attention to, like what's good and what's great.
mm,
The difference is very small. And so doing what we normally do is good.
mm,
Doing what my parents do is good. But doing what God is showing me individually is what's
mm,
great. And to make that decision was hard because I wasn't sure what that was. And I didn't want to go against what I'd known my whole life,
mm,
even though what they did was wrong. But I felt like God was pulling me somewhere else. And I didn't know what that was at that time.
mm,
So when I came back home, I was, still going to church, had a little time, and I'm like, okay, Lord, like I feel like I'm just too far left, and I don't know if I'm embarrassed.
mm,
But then He always remind me, like, but I love you anyways,
mm,
and so just going to church just because for me always kept me close, knowing that God still loved and cared about me, even when I feel
mm,
a certain kind of way, because your heart is deceitful. You will lie to yourself, and your feelings aren't always true.
mm,
Yes, you feel that way, but it's the reason why you feel that way lines up with God's word.
mm,
And when you get older and you kind of realize, okay, I have to monitor my feelings because I may feel like I'm unworthy, but God has already called me worthy.
mm,
So I have to like decide between the two. And so going to church for me wasn't just because that's what I'm supposed to do. It was more so that's what I need to do because the prodigal son always come back home. And
mm,
I'm like, I want to be home. So even if I'm just there physically and my heart's not there, I know my heart will eventually come
mm.
back.
This, whew, this is special, and I think this is really powerful because I think we know of many brothers and sisters who, be whether college, outside of college, or not, that have kind of gone through patches of their life where there's a disconnect between how they feel about themselves and how God feels about them. That's like sometimes a daily battle for all of us.
Yeah.
And for you, usually that's usually the breaking point where people are like, I ain't turning, I ain't rocking with this, right? I don't like the way I feel. But what was beautiful about what you're saying is just the reality of just that, I'm affirmed in my feelings. At the same time, my feelings can't be my own God. And so I found
Yeah.
freedom, I found affirmation, I found a reminder of who I really was and am in a time, and I needed it, right? And I was comfortable needing it at that time. That is really really powerful, and especially at the time that it was taking place. I think that's gonna bless a lot of people hearing that, because I think people are experiencing it now, right? I think people are
Yeah.
down, may have been out of work, may have made decisions and things that they struggle with, but just don't necessarily, they believe that God looks down upon them, and that's not true. In that,
Mm.
so this is helpful, because I think now, as you're kind of like, now you're painting a picture of kind of your walk with God and just that maturity and evolution that you're having with God, and then obviously, more doors and things being open because of the gifts that He's given you. You've talked a lot about this, and I think even in your youth throw girl camp, I love how you articulate how you were designed. Your body is designed to do something. You always talked about your body.
Yeah.
Our bodies are designed to do something, and in that, it's this beautiful appreciation of how God has designed you, and then ultimately seeing that as a way to glorify God. And so, even as you're like evolving and growing in your relationship with God, where did you start to see where you really felt like, okay, God, you have given me this gift, you've designed me a specific way, like this is you, like this is all you? When did that start to like really connect, or like it go on 100 for you?
Yeah. So I feel like for me, I knew it was a gift because it came easy.
Mm,
Right? Because when you're talented, my dad used to always say, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I was always talented with throwing the shot put. I didn't always work hard, right?
mm,
So, but there have been times when I felt like maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do. I remember my freshman year in college, it was rough. Freshman year was rough.
mm,
And we had NCAAs at Texas. And it rained, it poured. When I tell you, you couldn't write up a worse opportunity for us in our own home stadium. Like anything that could be wrong went wrong. It was crazy. But I still had to meet that summer internationally, and I went to Grosseto, Italy.
mm,
And I remember going there, and I almost didn't want to go because I had the choice to go to the Olympic trials or to go to juniors, but I felt like I wasn't ready for the Olympic trials, so I chose to go to
mm,
juniors. And I almost didn't really want to be there because I just competed and did horrible at
mm,
NCAA. I felt like crap.
mm.
And so I'm like, well, I'm here now. Like,
We
what's
here
what I
now,
got to
player.
do? I'm here. And so I just remember like just kind of praying through it and being around my little friends and meeting new people and being in the environment. And then when I competed, and then on my last throw, I PR'd by 3 feet.
Mm.
And I'm like, where'd that come from? So that means like that means like I really can do this. And that was like that confirmation I needed. And I was just like, okay, like, hey, so this is something that I can do.
Mm,
I know I can do this. And so I just know that I had to change some things that I was doing.
mm,
And so that was really like the moment, my freshman year, that summer, going into my sophomore year, where it kind of dawned on me, like, hey, Michelle, no, you're in the right place.
mm,
And I feel like I didn't really realize that that was God in the moment, but I knew it was a sign that was confirmation that this is for me.
mm.
Um, at that time. So I was like, well, this is what I am. This is what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep rolling with it until the wheels fall out. Because that's how I'm like, if I'm going this way and it's going good, all right, cool. We're going to keep going until I get redirected. So that was kind of like that moment for me.
This is beautiful, and I want to take this momentum further around the faith required, because I think for anyone understanding, right now we're in the middle of tournament season. This is evergreen, obviously, but you know, um, people used to hear about the stories, right? Home Depot was a sponsor for a long time because so many athletes work for Home
Yeah.
Depot, right? Because
Yeah.
and so even as you're kind of like even as you're kind of knocking things out of the park, through to the time that you're graduating undergrad, what was your conversation with God around just provision? Because even some of the top athletes, the level of just sponsorship and ability to just it just didn't seem to the outside in that this was the most lucrative, at least early
Yeah.
on. So what was your conversation with
Yeah.
God around that? Like, as a woman doing this track and field, like, how am I gonna make this work?
Yeah. So in the beginning, when my senior year in college, when I was supposed to win everything, and I didn't get the sponsorship, I didn't get anything. I had to move back home.
Mm,
And after you went to college, had a little bit of freedom. You don't want to move back home
mm.
because now you have rules again. I didn't have rules, but I moved back home because that was the choice that I had,
Mhm.
and I actually took a job at 24 Hour Fitness,
Mm,
and I took that job is because I knew the people there, they knew me, and they were going to let me have the flexibility I needed to do what I needed to do, and also it came with 2 free gym memberships, and I'm
mm,
like, well, that's one less bill I have to pay,
mhm,
so I took that opportunity, and I would just work through that, and then after I went through the Olympics in 2008, and going into 2009, I'm like, this is not what it is. Like, Michelle, we can't do this. If I want to go to the next level, I can't be on my feet for hours after practice and then wake up and do this all over again.
Mm.
I was like, I have to make enough money. And so I'm like, but how? Like, how do I do that? I remember just thinking how much prize money I can get. And I was like, well, you know what, Michelle? I think this is going to be the play. If I can finish in the top 8 at World Championships in 2009, I'm going to get a contract. Like, I said, I have to. And so I had to just prove that I'm worth the risk. And so I worked, went to World Championships in 2009 and finished 6th place. That's when I got the ESPN body issue. I got other things were coming my way. I got my Nike contract. But then, it takes a minute for all that stuff to come through. And I still was living at home. And because the contract wasn't that big. And I'm like, but how can I make enough money to go and live on my own? I went looking around at apartments, pricing apartments. I called friends. How much is your water bill? How much is your electric bill? How much is cable and internet? How much is the phone? How much is your cell phone? And so I started gathering all this data. And so then I looked at my contract and I'm like, okay, if I go to this meet and I finish 3rd, I get this. If I get 1st, 2nd, or I wrote it out. So I have a potentially to make this at the bottom and this at the top. So all the other prize money, I said, I don't know what those prize money are gonna be, but that's gonna be extra. But if I can execute these, I can make enough money to live on my own. And so then I'm like, well, I have to go back and train. And so that's how I kind of worked that. But when it came to faith, I believe that that's walking by faith. Because we look at walking by faith and we're just going to sit there and be like, okay, Lord, you're going to find a way, make a way, Lord. But Lord said, faith without works is dead. So we're out here saying we have faith, but a lot of us are just believing. And we're not actually using our faith by putting action to what we say that we believe. If God says that I can live on my own, but I have to do a little bit of work to show that I could handle this. I had to go do my due diligence and still do the work as if I'm going to live on my own. But I had to figure out, okay, make sure that I can afford it. Is this really real for me? And if it is, okay, cool. Let me find the best situation for me. And so that was me doing my due diligence, knowing what I had to prepare for, because I expect this to happen for me because I have faith in that. But I'm not going to wait for it to appear in thin air. And God doesn't want us to do that. And there's different seasons and different things. Sometimes you may have to sit down and let him work out some things before you get active again. But when we're talking about working by faith, walking by faith, it's actions. So even when looking back and now think about how I went about going to win gold, I had to figure out, okay, if God says the Olympic gold medalist is for me, Olympic gold medal is for me, then what do Olympic gold medalists do? Because since I'm going to be that, I might as well start acting the part. And it wasn't acting the part after I won. It was like, what do gold medalists do to even get there? What are the characteristics they have? And that's the part that I think we have a disconnect when it comes to faith, is that we're quick to believe and say we have faith, but God says, show me your faith by showing me your works. And a lot of us don't have the works to show that we have faith. But when we start to put when we put our faith to the test, you have the works to back it up, showing where if God said that you're going to be a best-selling author, but you ain't never wrote one page, right? It's like, so how do you believe you're going to be an author and you haven't even attempted to write anything? You said you're going to get this job, but you never took the step to even get the right credentials to get it. Even though he is God and he can do all that, but I have to show God, Lord, I trust you. And when you bless me with this opportunity, your girl is ready.
Yo, I love this, man. I love it because I think there are a couple of, there just so much, there's so much in what you said. Like, one, I think that even though we say it, I always say that, God chin checks what we believe, right? Against reality.
Yeah.
And so you said all of that too. I think sometimes, what I love about sometimes even with the Bible and scripture is the actual terms and the illustrations and visions it shows. And so much of it is about competition and the theater and there's so much that elements are tied to it. But I love that you've humanized the reality of the journey, because naturally it's just like, oh, she's just good. She's strong. You know, she probably had to work hard, had some disappointment. But even after 2008, like, I don't think people understand this. This is 2008, 2009. You had to map it out, say, okay, and that's not even guaranteed. People don't understand. You going to have
It's
to be
not.
overseas for how many minutes, hopping from this meet to this meet, doing this. It
Yeah.
just, you know what I'm saying? And then the fact is, you literally did it down to the dollar of like, okay, if I get this, I get this. Here's my ceiling. All right. And here's my floor. And then that was your
Hmm.
journey. And then remember, 2008 and 2016 is 8 years, fam. And even though London was
Yeah.
in between then, it was still
Yeah.
journey. Like I appreciate you kind of giving the detail around that, because I think that people make people inaccessible, right? And they say, well, that was her, and God is gonna have to do it this way. And I don't think there's any way around it, even for you as divinely gifted as you are. You had to go through that.
Yeah. You do. You do. And you're going through it a little different than mine.
Mm,
And like our journeys are so unique for us. Like
mm,
God loves us enough and he's going to give you exactly what you need to be what he created you to be.
mm,
So since you and I are the same, we're not going to look the same. We're not going to go through the journey. We're not going to handle it the same.
mm,
He's not going to bless us the same way. And sometimes we got to remember God's give us grace and mercy. And some people need more grace,
mm,
more mercy than some others do because they need that grace. And that's what God has created them for them. And you may have a little less grace because you need that hard work and elbow grease for your life, for yourself, because that's how God designed you.
mm,
And so just about that, it's really easy to get distracted comparing yourself to others.
mm, mm,
But if you look at the animal kingdom, right? The squirrels don't look at birds thinking they wish they could fly.
mm, mm,
A squirrel do what a squirrel do because that's what a squirrel know to do, and they're gonna be a squirrel because that's who they are.
mm,
And as humans, we start to compare, and we see that squirrel, and you're an eagle. You're like, dang, I wish I was a squirrel. But you're an eagle. And you don't even flap your wings because you're too busy watching a squirrel wishing you could be on the ground with the squirrel.
mm.
And so it's like when we really focus in on what God has for us and what God is doing for us and the journey he sets aside for us, it makes life easy. It puts everything in perspective. Then you're allowed to, not allowed, but you've given yourself permission to celebrate those who are doing good when they're doing good, even when you feel like you're not. Because you know that God's doing a thing in your lane and their lane. God has already worked a couple of things out, but then you're free to celebrate because you understand what God is doing in your life and that no one could take away what God has given you.
Mm,
But you can forfeit it by not going to go get it.
mm. For lack of a better word, all pun intended, you could forfeit it. If you, this is special. Everything you're saying is so special and so applicable. I have to ask this question though, right? Even as we're kind
Okay.
of on the tail end, it's to be making a living from like through the giftings that come through your mind and body is something, right? Like
Mhm.
every day that passes by, I am one day much older than who I used to be. Every day that
Yeah.
passes by, I'm one day closer to the day that I may walk away from this. Like, how has your faith along the journey just anchored you? Like, oh, just because I can imagine people just being overwhelmed, like, oh, like, like, everything I'm doing, how long I'm gonna be able to do this? What am I gonna do after I'm done? When that comes, when that day comes, what am I gonna do? Like I can just imagine just like that just being a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
What is your conversations with God? How does your faith keep you present, prayerful and planning, but present
Yeah.
and just trusting like God got me. He will take care of me. I will be okay. I always have been okay.
Yes. Every time I think I'm not gonna make it, I do.
Mm.
And 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 I think too, sometimes we forget that everything that happens in life is not an accident.
Mm. Mm.
it's not an accident. These things are planned. It was already predestined,
Mm.
right? And so even though we do have free will, all options have already been worked out.
Mm.
So I just I know that okay, I knew from jump that track is not gonna last forever.
Mm.
I'm always one day away from a career-ending injury.
Mm.
Like in track and field, if you don't prepare for that, that's not using wisdom, right? Even though we're taught we go all in, but we know that we're always one practice away. One step down the street, you trip on the concrete and it's over.
Mm.
So I've always known that in my mind, and I've always had little other things that I'm interested in going.
Mm.
And I just build up over time. And sometimes I have to dial back on all the extra stuff I like to do to make sure I'm focusing on my main job.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always been that person like, okay, I have plan A, but I don't have to wait till plan A is over to work plan B and C and D.
Mm.
I can work them simultaneously. I hope I said that right. and it's okay. I just can't put as much energy into these things as I was like, because I have to put most of my energies to A. And so that's how I always thought. And those side things that I did has always in the gaps I missed.
Mm.
And so I had knee surgery. I have an autoimmune disease, and even when things were not going well, God had just always dropped something, be like, there you go, got you.
Mm.
Right when I be like, okay, man, oh man. And I wake up in the morning, I get a direct deposit, and I'm like, where did this come from? Like, it was right on time. And so that's how I'm able to just keep going, because God has never failed me. He's never failed me. He will never fail. If you, what's that? There's a song that I absolutely love. I listen to it over and over. And he said, he can do all things but fail. And it's true. He cannot fail. And so when stuff like that keeps happening in your life, you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that. And then to put it to anywhere as in like luck is disrespectful to who God is and his sovereignty, being in all places at all time, having all power over everything. So when we put that into perspective, I could plan and still do this and figure out everything else out, because he's right there with me. He's already figured it out. He's just waiting for me to be obedient and do what he needs me to do.
Yo, this, I don't think people, I think in what you're saying, people have to recognize that, I don't think we think we're that special enough. I know that may sound counterintuitive in a time that I think in a society, and sometimes a culture that sometimes worships self and like, I'm so special. But there's another side of it, which means like, you don't think you're special enough or loved enough or considered or chosen enough that God would order everything, that he would make sure that you are okay, that he would not fail you, that there is a plan for you. And that, I just see that just dripping in everything that you're saying. And it's just, it's ministering to me in a real way. And I know that has to be the same for other people, I think, who are in unique valley moments, who are kind of at the end of themselves. And literally it is a daily manna situation. What I mean? It's just like, this is...
Well, what is that verse? He said, I care for the fields. Well,
look at the birds of the air.
And the birds of the air. The birds don't ever wonder where their next meal comes from, because they know they're going to be provided for. And if he cares enough for the animals, he cares enough about you, and he cared enough that Jesus died for you. And that's why, like, sometimes we have to break it down to like, okay, you know what? He did it just for me. He did it for all of us, but he knew you by name. He knows the hairs on your head. He knows when you don't have the words and you're praying and you're crying, what every tear means. It's like he knows that. He's so intimate with us, and we forget that how intertwined God is with us, because when he sent his son died. Easter is this weekend. So his son died, and when Jesus ascended back into heaven, he sent in the Holy Spirit to come and live with us and be with us at all times. And sometimes, and it's fun, this is something I'm learning now, is that we underestimate the power of the Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit is God. It's still God, just in a different form, and how he interacts with us. And so knowing that you have God within you that he's there, like he's inside of you, he's consumed you. And so knowing that you have it in you, that's, for me, that's comforting. and and I kind of want to go back a little bit to say, like, sometimes our human brains were taught to like make it make sense, right? We try to make it make sense. God makes no sense because he stands outside of time and space for us. He set time and space so that we can have a better understanding of and how to move throughout day to day. But everything that God does does not fit into what we think is okay and what's normal.
Mm.
And so knowing that, it's like, okay, if I am with that type of person, then I don't have to worry about nothing. He knows what I need before I need it. So by the time I need it, it's going to show up because he already predestined it for it to happen.
Fam, fam. I know you. For those listening and watching, this is a message, a timeless message. You know what I was even thinking, even as you were speaking, I was taking in everything and just listening and just taking in and processing. The thing that's blowing me away about you and your story, I think it makes sense for us in the context of where our identity comes for someone who puts their faith in God. You're saying
Yeah.
that, okay, the highest identity I have is a child of God, that I'm a son, that I'm a daughter of the Most High, that God had lived and died for me, and that I am in right standing with God forever, and even till
Yeah.
Jesus returns, and I'll be just like Him. Right? That's the clarity. But there's something to
Yeah.
be said, even from that's no coincidence. That's even from your early years, even from how your parents interacted with you. About you had a freedom of identity. You had a freedom of identity in terms of how you viewed your father, freedom of identity by who you could be and who you decided to be. You went on a journey
Hmm.
about this. You have a freedom of identity to say, you know what, this thing may end. It's not going to last forever, even though this has been a helpful part and central part. Because so much of whether you are someone who has been a banker, an attorney, someone who's worked in the local mill, who worked, or whatever you've done, that fuses to identity. And I think we're living in times when people are being crushed by their identities, being crushed by the reality of life. And then on the flip side, we hear how many stories about brothers and sisters who have long, illustrious professional careers in sports and the like, and can't transition. They struggle to transition in ways that it just does something to their well-being. And so
Yeah.
I just think that this is so empowering to hear how you just how you move. It makes me smile because I just think it's just like there's just you're like, I know who I am. I know who I am. Let me ask you this, even as we're going, or as we're closing. Um, you're now just like you said in a different stage, and I'm always curious about what the mission is now. Right? There's God's mission, but
Yeah.
there's a number of initiatives you throw, girl. That you are a professional maker. I remember I'm just like, man, it makes sense to me because I'm just like, because you're so dope and you got like, there's so many things that you do. So it doesn't surprise me, and it surprises me because like you're very
Yeah.
matter of fact about it. But just what's on your heart now at this stage of your life, at this stage of your career? How do you think about what your priorities are now, and how does God help you inform what you prioritize now?
Yes. So, well, 2020 changed a lot of things for a lot of people.
Mm.
And I'm appreciating the time that I have because I've been throwing now for 24 years, Lawrence.
Mm.
24
Woo-hoo!
years. That's crazy.
Woo.
Crazy. And when I think about it, oh, I haven't said this out loud, but if I don't throw anymore, I'm at peace with it.
Mm.
It's okay.
Mm.
Because this Olympics is coming up, but so much has happened. I've been sick a few times. I had to have surgery this year because I got sick, and it was just like weird stuff kept
Mm.
happening. And I was like, well, I'm just not going to be ready. I'm just not going to be ready. They're going to expecting this, and this, but who is they?
Who is that?
Who is, like, who is they? Like, who cares what they think? I just going to be ready to move when God tells me to move. And so like right now my speaking has picked up tremendously,
Mm.
and it's crazy how it has happened, like how it's happened, and how things just keep popping up. And I'm starting to see that there's this thing that keeps popping up and keeps showing up for me, and that is speaking. And so I signed up for a master class so I can invest in becoming a better speaker, because I really believe that, what does it say? We are transformed, not by the renewing of our mind, but we are something about the words of our testimonies. I can't remember what comes before that. We are redeemed by the words of our testimonies. And when I started to share my story and really be open with it, I realized how it really touched and helped other people. And every time it does, I'm like, really? Like, that's what you got from this story? Like, I'm just like talking. But then I realized there's power in that. And I realized that how I present myself, and no matter what formal like setting it is, like, there's always a faith question that pops up. I could be in a corporate setting and someone like, the way you speak, I feel like you are a person of faith. Like, what is that? And then I'm like, okay, Lord, this keeps popping up when it's not supposed to pop up. And I'm trying to be politically correct by not putting all this out there in a corporate setting, but then it shows up anyways. So I'm like, okay, Lord, like, if this is a way for you to show up in my life so you can show other people you through me, then this is what it is. And we're going to roll with that. And I feel like he's kind of leading me that way, because I'm like, still to this day, when I think I've done the worst presentation ever, I get so many compliments and so many takeaways that people get. And I'm just like, really, Jesus? Like, this is how you're going to keep doing me? But apparently this is something he has for me. So I'm at peace with my career at this moment. And plus, we still don't know how things are going to work out with Corona being in the picture. And so I'm okay with that for this year. Now, I still want to come back and do world championships, because world championships is at home. And I always wanted to compete at home. But then I believe by next year, everything will be a little bit more settled and steady, so I can kind of really focus more on what I need to do for that. But I'm down for whatever. That's why I always say, like, Lord, whatever you decide to do, I'm cool with that. So that's what I'm gonna roll with.
I love it. I love it. I love it. My sister, when do you feel most connected to God? What's your ideal rhythm with God? If somebody had to map it out, your perfect day, how do you best connect with God?
Oh man. I will say this in all transparency. That is something that I struggle with, because you see so many people that say, like, oh, I just spent all this time with God and it was amazing. I was just 1 hour in his presence, kneel down at his feet. And I was like, I don't want to, everybody have to worship Jesus like that. Like, my worship looks a little different. I talk to him different. And so defining that for me is what I've been doing. But when I just have a moment, because I realize I talk to him all the time. I don't have to be kneel down or have my head bowed, be like, hey, Lord, I come to you right now. Like, no, I don't have to do that. I can just be like, hey, Lord, listen. Like on that last start of the Olympics, like, Lord, you said I was going to win. This your moment to come through for your girl. And so, like, just having those moments where I can just really just pour out all of my heart to him, because he already knows it. He knows it. He just waiting for me to give it to him and just repeat it back to him. So then now he knows that I trust him. So I feel the closest when I feel like I'm about to lose it all and I finally give it up all to him. And that's when I feel the closest to him.
Michelle, you are a gift to the world. You know, I don't think that you know, me saying this is saying, I'm saying this to somebody who knows who her father is, knows who her heavenly father is. But I want you to know that you are a gift to the world. The way you encourage brothers and sisters, sometimes through your words, often you don't even have to, is such a gift. And I just thank God for you. I thank God for you knowing who you are. I thank God that you are an obedient child who listens to God, who recognizes that God has gifted you to speak in a generation and in a time such as this, that I think that God would be seen in such a remarkable way, more remarkable than he is, through your words. And so I'm just gifted as somebody blessed by God to know you. And I think we've all been blessed all who listen, all who watch have been blessed to get to know you just even more through this. And so we love you. I love you, my sister. How do people find you and
Love you
follow you? How
too.
do they support you? How do they do that?
Yes, well, I just want to say thank you for letting me be on your show today. I
Mm.
appreciate you because I got love for you too. Like we always are here, right? And always manage to text me or send me a voice message right on time every single time. So I appreciate you being you. You've always been you no matter what, and I appreciate that.
Mhm.
But you can definitely find me at shotdiva.com. That's my website, but I'm Shot Diva on everything. So you go to IG, Shot Diva, Facebook, Shot Diva, you can find me there.
Most def, y'all. Please do that and do that. She got a couple mils, so she'll find you. I guess. Let me stop. Michelle, love you. Thank you. I'm gonna speak to you again very very soon. All right.